Welcome everyone! Now I'll just say it from the start, this is for sure the hardest study I've shared so far. Finding the win is difficult on its own, but black can also trick white a number of times and it's easy to go wrong. Of course, feel free to pause the video and figure it all out, but it's also quite nice to just see everything unfold. So, white to play and win. If you'd like to pause the video, you can do that now. I'll just move on. White's first move is not the hard part. White should play e7. Of course, white wants to queen the pawn, and by going e7 now, white doesn't give the black king a chance to get close enough. It's of course not that simple though, because white can still draw the game if he is careless. Here, black is putting white to the test right away with this tricky move, knight g2 check. Now that is not a random check, black actually forces the king to go to h5, and black is hoping to get his knight to f6 at the right moment, because if white would queen the pawn, then the fork on f6 secures the draw. Now why does this check force king h5, you might ask? Because if white goes king to g4, then it's already a draw, because this helps the black knight to reach a good square. Black would go knight e3 check. Now, if king to h4, then black wins the pawn right away because of the fork on f5. So white has to go king to h5. Now, first things first, rook a8 is necessary to stop the pawn, and white will actually lose the pawn no matter what. For example, white can try knight f7 check, and after king h7, go knight to d8, using the knight as a shield and threatening with e8 equals queen. But thanks to white's king g4 move at the start, the black knight saves the day with knight to d5, attacking the pawn, which cannot be defended. Knight c6 doesn't help, because after knight takes, there is rook to a5, winning the pinned knight. And of course, if white queens, then the queen falls after the check, and since white won't be able to promote the h-pawn, it's gonna be a draw. So going back, that's why king to h5 is forced. Now black guards the queening square rook to a8, and you can see that compared to the variation with king to g4, black is now a tempo down because the knight is still on g2 and not on e3. So white is winning in this case. First, there's again the check on f7, going for knight to d8 again, but here's a very nice idea for black. King to h7. That looks like just a normal move, but this is one of the things that makes this study so hard. Now black actually has a stalemate trick. Let's take a look at that. White still goes for knight to d8, which is the right move. But watch this. Black checks with the knight. Now this isn't the hard part yet. White just needs to avoid the knight forks. For example, king to h4, then knight to g6 loses the pawn. And if king to g4, then knight to d5, and with or without the promotion, white will lose the pawn. Therefore, white has to go king to g5. Now white is threatening to promote, so black can only try rook takes knight, but it is here that white can fall into black's trap. If white goes for the natural pawn takes equals queen, then black draws with knight e6 check, because after white saves the queen, knight, and king cover all possible squares of the black king, so it's stalemate. Very deep and very cool trick, and this wouldn't have worked with the black king on g8 or g7, because then the king would still have the h7 square to go to. Really clever, but that's not all. White also shouldn't promote to a rook, because it's the same thing after knight e6 check, and after knight takes, it's again stalemate. I guess you wouldn't go for a rook once you see you cannot promote to a queen, but anyway, for completeness sake, I just wanted to add that. Now going back, in order to win, white actually has to promote to a bishop, because then even without a pawn, white would be able to give checkmate if black ever lost his knight. And as it turns out, that's what's bound to happen now. Now if black doesn't take the pawn, then he'll just lose easily, so he does take. And once again, white has only one move that wins. Of course, if black loses the knight, he's going to get checkmated, so the question is, can white trap the knight? And as a matter of fact, he can. King to g4, there's no way out. If knight to g1, then knight to d3, taking away the c1 square. Now if the knight tries knight to e2, then bishop to f6 cuts off the last escape squares. King to g6 does nothing, the bishop on b2 still takes the necessary squares away, and next white just goes king to f3 and king to g2, and the knight is lost. Now the only other sensible option is knight f2 check, then king to f3. Now if knight to d1, then bishop f6 again, and black will lose the knight. So knight to h3. Now white can win with a number of move orders, but let's say knight to d3. Now going to g1 again won't help, because after king to f2, knight h3 check, and king to g2, the knight has no squares. So let's say king to g6. Now king to g4 forces the knight to g1, but after knight f4 check and king to g7, white plays the killing move, bishop to b6. The knight is attacked, it has nowhere to run, and white will win the game. Awesome study, please let me know in the comments how you did. But of course, even just watching this unfold is great, and I'm sure we can learn a lot from that as well. Anyway, I'm a big fan of these studies, so more are definitely coming up. If you like this too, you can check out the playlist. Please like and subscribe. I'll see you again soon, and take care.